Well, so good morning, and we're going to just get started in a minute. If you're joining with us online, glad that you are able to join, whether live or later on. And Sean is here today, so if you have questions, prayer requests, and you're live, please feel free to join with the chat. Share those things. We'll look forward to being able to pray together at the end. Let me pray for us, and then I'll share. Lord, we give thanks for today and ask your blessings and lift up this day to you. And Lord, may we live into this day towards you, following you, seeking you, knowing you, loving you. And I do give praise for the book of Deuteronomy and the messages that it speaks into our life. So bless us in Jesus' name. Amen. So first announcement as far as with living into the changes that are being made as far as how we approach the requirements over mask mandates and stuff like that. We're still praying, looking forward to waiting for the governor to come out and hopefully just drop kind of all the actual requirements. There is that part, thinking about this morning, hopefully we have learned that, if we have symptoms of a virus infection, whatever it might be, that we stay home and just realize that there are people who have autoimmunity disorders. There are people who can be more vulnerable to sicknesses that could lead to death. And I'm one of these ones that's typically not in my nature. So one of my areas of probably fallen pride is, in my entire time as a pastor, I have never missed a Sunday morning because of sickness where, I did it one time because of the pandemic, and that was the part where that's not just, I'd come in and I'd have like 103 temperature. I wouldn't talk to anybody, I'd just stay in the back, come out, preach, then, but that's the part where it's like, okay, we've got to learn to live differently, especially where with something like COVID, if you've been immunized, great, as far as it's going to help you. But there are a few instances where people have been inoculated against it and they have now contracted it. And, and you don't know if it's variants, that's where they're talking about doing boosters and things like that. But with herd immunity, it is going to be something that probably, that the incidences as far as in the future will go dramatically down. But with all of that as kind of a backdrop, when the guidance that was for what we do on Sunday mornings was released, it's really as we function in our worship services. And so then we're left looking at this, and there are many ways that we gather at the church that aren't a worship service. And so with that, we are going to follow the guidance that says that this is like our ministries in some way are more like work service, something that we are called to do by the Lord. And so in these smaller gatherings, we're going to follow the guidance that says if you've been inoculated, if you've received the vaccine, or if you've had COVID and then you're and the symptoms are past, then you don't have to wear a mask. Yeah. And it means you don't have now. So you don't have to wear a mask when you come into the building. You don't have to wear a mask in here. I haven't decided yet about, and we're not doing it for this class. Sean typically, I think, turns in the report of people who were here. But, so when you come in, there's still the attestation form. That's probably going to be passing away fairly quickly. Now, a couple of things on this. If the way the guidance is that if you have been inoculated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you haven't, then you're supposed to wear a mask. We're going to play this by the honor system, as far as we will not be checking anybody's records. And so, this is just the part where it just is like, okay, moving forward, it's got to be the honor system, I think. And that's the part where if you have symptoms, stay home. And if not, feel free to come, and you won't have to come. We're not there on Sunday morning yet, because Sunday morning has a different requirement by the state. So on Sunday morning, we're still wearing masks, and we're hoping that by the 30th, we will not be wearing masks. So, good to see all of you.
See smiles.
Okay, so we are in Deuteronomy. I think we're chapter 9. Oh, we have a few new members of our Bible study who will be with us this summer, and our trainee ministry team is going to be joining us on Wednesday mornings. And so we will not overwhelm you, but when the Bible study's over, there will be people who will come up and greet you. So. But they, just so you know, they do that with any time they recognize people who haven't yet regularly joined with us. And one last thing as far as this is that hopefully you all feel comfortable that, if you don't feel comfortable coming into a situation like this where we're living out of the honor system and you want to wear a mask, that's great. There's a few things with that. So for example, we have a couple of office people who have people in their family or situations where they need to be concerned about not catching COVID. They've been vaccinated, but they have a family member who has an autoimmune disorder, for example. And so, while they know that if they catch it with the vaccine, that the damage, the risk would probably be mild. They have a mask ready to put on, where if they, don't know if the person's been vaccinated or not, and they'll put their mask on just for their own safety for their child, because if they get it, it's fine. But their child's been inoculated and there's no sign in his body that he has any immunity to it, because he doesn't have any immunity to hardly anything. And so there's situations like that. Other people have different ones where, if that's your situation, you should feel every sense of, well, I'm going to wear a mask. Now, the one thing, if you're in that, I'd say talk to your doctor about it, because the typical mask does not stop you from getting infected. It's helped you not spread it to others. They make some, they're called N95 masks, but typically if you're going to really use it and it's going to help you not get infected by somebody else, you've got to go through a process of getting fitted to find the right mask that fits your face. So just want to get that information out. And with that, Deuteronomy chapter 9. So give a little bit of background as far as where we are in Deuteronomy, help you guys catch up to this. So Deuteronomy, it represents a reaffirmation of the covenant. Almost 40 years after receiving the covenant at Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai, it gets called both, the mountain of the Lord, the place where Moses received the 10 Commandments. They've gone through wandering through the wilderness because of their rebellion. We're going to hear about that again today. Moses himself was not able to enter into the promised land because because he got frustrated and showed that frustration before the people when he struck the rock and he showed disrespect to the Lord, but also because the people tripped him up, and he followed their example instead of the example of the Lord. And so we hear it in Deuteronomy that he blamed them. It's a sad thing for him, and yet it's also now the time of passing on the torch. And you know, he's 120 years old. They're on the far side of the Jordan River. They're on the plains of Moab. He's looking out across the Jordan. They see the promised land in the horizon, and we're in the midst of the second of a series of 4 messages where he is preaching his last words. But this is also God's words to them. Now, it ends up that Deuteronomy takes the form of a suzerain treaty, and it represents an affirmation of the covenant. And so in that, you're getting this picture that God is our king, and we are his people. And in it, there are things that we're hearing as far as God's purposes behind this, where they are intended to be a light to the nations. No other God, because there are no other gods, but no other of the gods of the people have done anything like what Yahweh is going to do. He's going to dwell with his people. He's going to bless his people. If they keep covenant with him, it will be like a city on a hill shining out a light of saying, look at what their God does for them and who he is, what's going on over there. Let us go see this. And so there's that vision of what could be. And then there is the reality of what has been. And in fact, in chapter 9, that's one of the things that we're going to hear. Now, in this reaffirmation of the covenant, this is the covenant with Moses. It's not the covenant with Abraham. This is the covenant for the nation of Israel about how can we, a sinful, broken people, dwell in the midst of a holy and pure God who is absolutely good, cannot stand evil in his presence, but is also compassionate and kind. And so what God ends up doing is he gives you stipulations, regulations. The book of Leviticus is a whole set of instructions about how to come close in a physical way. The book of Deuteronomy, it will reiterate some of those realities of the physical way, but it's also looking at the interior and the heart and how do we align ourselves. This is about how to live with Yahweh. 10 words of life. We call them 10 commandments, but that's not what they call themselves. These are 10 words that are spoken by God, and they're words of life. This is how you're going to live. Behind all of this, you should hear the more fundamental covenant that God formed with Abraham. I'm going to be your God. You're going to be my people. And I'm going to bless you, and through you I'm going to bless the nations. And this is all about this blessing of God being our God, we being his people, us living together, and how to live into the blessings. Now, we hear this affirmation of the 10 Commandments. So he literally speaks them again. And then he gives them the Shema. And the Shema comes from the first word. Shema means listen. Listen up. This is important stuff. The Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And so then that came right after the 10 words of life. And it was a summary. And it was giving them this sense of, okay, you've heard what the words are. You can summarize the words in this simple statement. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Now, be very careful to live this way. And then, out of that, it then moved forward. And last week, what we heard was this call of, okay, you're going to go into the promised land. And you need to listen to me because this is important. You have to do what I tell you to do as far as taking conquest of the land. You're going to have to wipe the people out. Because if you don't, They will snare you, trip you. You will be snagged into the idolatry. So we heard the word harem, which is this idea that you're setting apart. You're not going to just, it's not about you looting and getting booty. I'm going to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, both through your industry and both through what's there just naturally. It's filled with abundance. It will be great for you. But the people who are there, you're going to have to get rid of them. Now, it then goes on and it says, and I'm doing this because of the oath that I swore to your forefathers. It's not because of how strong you are. It's not because of how moral you are. It's not because of how great that you are. It's because of my love for you. And we talked last week that whole chapter is actually a chiasm. There's a beginning and an ending that are parallel. Then there's a middle frame that goes in between. And right at the center of it is this great explanation of God's love. Now, in chapter 9, he is going to continue to talk about why he is having them take possession of this land, and why and literally here, an enacting of judgment upon the people who are living there. And we're going to hear the moral side of it. The reason that I'm doing it now is because I've decided that it is time to bring judgment upon these people for what they have done. I'm not doing it because you're more moral than they are. I'm doing it because of my own righteousness. Now, with that as a backdrop, let's start listening to what Moses says, what God's word and how God spoke through Moses to us. Chapter 9, verse 1. Hear, O Israel. NIV does a good job of translation here, so you can hear this word. So this should sound to you like Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Because it's the same word. It's Shema. Now, this is the fourth time that this word Shema has appeared in Deuteronomy. And it just so happens that in every time that it's appeared so far, when it is said, the words that follow have obvious significance. So, when you hear this, hear, O Israel, Shema, listen up, people. This is important. There is a lesson here for you and I to learn. You are now about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with larger cities that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall. Anakites. Now the Anakites, so in the backdrop of this, and we've been reminded of this story, we're going to be reminded of these stories again. In fact, this specific story, they sent scouts into the promised land. There were 12 of them, one from each tribe. They went forward. 2 of the scouts came back. Do you remember their names, the ones who said we could take them? Caleb and Joshua. So Joshua and Caleb came back. Now, but they didn't speak first. The other 10 spoke first. They're huge. They're giants. There's no possible way. Now, part of what we're listening to in this chapter, there is this part where, and the questions have been asked before in the study. How do they get to this place of disbelief, distrust? I mean, they had just experienced, if you go back the 40 years when they send in, it's at that point they've been there about a year since they've been released from Egypt. They've been in the most powerful empire in the world at the time, and God had delivered them out and literally parted the sea, and they had gone through like on dry land. And then they send scouts in and they see these large peoples and they go, there's no possible way. And you're like, what's going on? But that's going to be a repeated refrain in this chapter where you think about what happened and then you're like, what were they thinking? There's a couple of reflection points on that. At its very root, the nature of sin, which is evil, really doesn't make sense. It's not rational. It's not, I mean, in the sense of it's not a reasonable thing. Now, there can be a logic to evil, but it's a corrupt logic. The other part is this: you become like what you worship. When you worship idols, you become deaf, dumb, and mute. That's part of the Old Testament theology. And so, and that becomes part of our call to growing up in Christ, is to be renewed by the transformation of our minds. And it's to learn and to see, in the light of what God gives us, his revelation, what reality is, and then to be able to see the logic of reality and then choose it and to live into it.
Ralph?
Yes?
Had many of the people that actually experienced the crossing of the Red Sea died off by now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That might be.
Yeah, so that, and I mean, that was part of the stipulation is that, okay, this generation that were the adults who were in charge at the time at Mount Horeb, that they pass away because they don't get to take possession. Yeah. So verse 2, the people are strong and tall Anakites. You know about them and have heard it said, who can stand up against the Anakites? But be assured today that the Lord, I am, and this for the trainees. So whenever you see Lord, all capital in the Old Testament, it's translating the divine name that was given to Moses at the Exodus. Now, in the background of that, the patriarchs knew the name, and you'll see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob actually refer to their God as, and probably the way that you would pronounce it is something like Yahweh. But it's not a title, it's a personal name. And they didn't understand the meaning of the name during the patriarchal period, but in the Exodus they came to understand it. And that name is the God who makes covenant and keeps his promises and is willing to save you with his mighty hand out of Egypt. And then, and so I am is the root of it, and Moses said, who's the God who's going to take us? When I go to the people and say, okay, your God is going to deliver you, who do I say? And he says, I am who I am. And Yahweh seems to be a shortened or an elaboration of that root verb, I am. So when I read the Old Testament and I read and I see Lord, what I'm thinking is not a title. I'm thinking a name of a person. This is the name that you're going to know me by for all generations. And so when I teach the Bible study, I regularly say I am or Yahweh, so that you just don't think of God far and distant, just Lord, but you're thinking of him as personal, as the one who I know personally, more like Ryan and Brendan and Kristen and Elaine and Sean, and so it's like that. But be assured today that I am your God, is the one who goes across ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them quickly as the Lord has promised you. Now, the last time we were together, we heard chapter 8. And in chapter 8, there was directions being given about how this holy war was going to proceed. We use the term, this is one of the ways that we describe it. The idea of holy is something that's set apart. In one sense, you have this idea of cherem, which is that you're setting apart these things. You refuse to use them, but that's not the typical word for holiness. Kadosh, this idea of set apart, but because it gets used of Yahweh, it ends up taking on all of his moral tones. Absolutely good, absolutely right, that which is pure, that which is always does what is good, cannot stand any evil or corruption in his presence. And that's the idea of holiness. We say holy war because they're supposed to cleanse the land from the idolatry. And God calls them into this. And so we heard it in chapter 8, and when we heard it in chapter 8, there's a little bit, this is the part where you're hearing the address in 8, you're hearing the address in 9, we're talking about the same subject. You're going to go in and it's going to be successful. And when it goes successfully for you, don't sit there and think to yourselves, wow, we're all that. Look at how strong we are. Look at how good we are. Look at what we're able to do. This all happened because the Lord your God. But realize that while you'll be successful, it's going to also be in segments. There's going to be progress made, but it's not all going to happen in one day. Here, you've already heard that part. Here, you hear about the part about again quickly. This doesn't negate what was said before. It doesn't mean that what was said before has been forgotten. But it is going to be that sense that Yahweh's going to go before you. He's going to fight the battle. And it's going to go quickly, but it doesn't mean like a microwave. It doesn't mean 2 minutes. But it means you're going to make this progress and you're going to make this progress. You go to the book of Joshua, you read through that, you begin to see, they go to the walls of Jericho, they go to Ai, they're making progress, but it goes well, it goes quick, but it's not instant. One of the things about this Bible study is please ask your questions. I much prefer dialogue than to monologue. And so we're working through this. If there's something here that you don't understand, if there's something that even you like, this looks cool, please share it. And so let's see where we're at. In verse 3, what you're hearing, one of the ways that this gets summarized and becomes, as far as a theological description for God, is that this is one of the examples in Scripture of what we have here, where one of the pictures of God in the Old Testament that emerges is God as a warrior. And in fact, he's our warrior. And in fact, he is the great warrior that we put our trust in, because what we really want is we want him to fight the battle. We have a part to play in this conquest. They were going to go to war. They were going to fight. But what comes is that they're not going to war by themselves. They're going to war with Yahweh, and the victory is going to be because of him. This is this idea of participation where we have a part to play, but we're trusting in God and we know that he is the main player. It's one of the most fundamental truths of Scripture. It's Old Testament, New Testament. This is life with Jesus. Jesus is our divine warrior. He's the one that we look to for our salvation. He's the one that we look to for our strength. When we have problems, we should turn to him. When we are in trouble, we should call out to him. This is never intended to be a life where, we just go on by ourselves and then we get into trouble and then we turn to God. It's a life with God. It's a life following God. We let him be the leader. And this chapter is trying to flesh some of that out. Verse 4. After I am your God has driven them out before you, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of this land because of my righteousness. In the last chapter we heard he's doing this because he loves you. And now we're hearing he's also doing this because of righteousness' sake and because of judgment upon the peoples. And this is the part where God has this great big plan. And there are pieces to it that you and I, we don't know and we don't understand. And so we walk by faith. We don't always know why this happens over there or that happens over there, but we can trust in God. And every once in a while we get some little glimpse that we realize we know that he wants to bless us. In this is where we are seeing part of the plan worked out. If we read carefully, if we had started back in Genesis and we read the 5 books of Moses, and we're sitting and we're building a theology of the Pentateuch, okay, how has God revealed himself in these 5 books of Moses? One of the things that we would have is, okay, he's the creator God. He wants to save his creation from sin. He is committed to working with people to do it. He called the family of Abraham to be the means by which he brings his promises to Adam and Eve to fruition. And then as you follow along that, you realize that we human beings aren't the best partners in the world. We've got issues. Every member of Abraham's family had issues. And many times it gets it right in the way of what God's trying to do. But it doesn't stop what God's doing. And he committed to work with these people. He loves them. And so you see this process move out. And there was this deep, mysterious thing where he had promised Abraham this land, he and his descendants, and I'm going to place you in this land, and you're going to become more numerous than the stars in the heavens, but not yet. In fact, you're going to have to go into Egypt, and you're going to be there for 400 years. But after you've been there 400 years, then you'll come back and you'll take possession. And in Genesis, you were told that the time for judgment for these people wasn't yet. And so there's this theme where God's doing a whole bunch of things. He's saving the world. He's working through Israel. But he also knows what's going on in all the rest of the nations. And what you realize is that God desires all people to be saved. He manifests grace. He tries to reach out to people. God is there before we ever get there. But the nature of things is that people don't respond to him. And the people who are in the land, we're now going to hear it. They're being ousted because of their unrighteousness. This is God bringing judgment upon them. Okay. So when you get there, don't think, oh, we're so much better than they are. Now, there is an absolute corollary as far as we should take the very same thing when we're out thinking about people who don't yet know Jesus. In the Alpha course, I haven't seen the newest videos. So, this is where I'm an old guy. So I go back to, all the first talks and everything like that. But, there's this thing where it's like, we often look at ourselves and then we compare ourselves to other people. And so, when you sit there and, let's say, we go, well, we know there's been some really good people, like Mother Teresa and, they'd be really high up on the list. I mean, they'd be right there, right at the ceiling. And I might not be Mother Teresa, though something like 80% of people, I think like that, when they got interviewed with a set of questions, ended up thinking that they were more virtuous than Mother Teresa. But, she's up there, Hitler's down there, and I'm probably right about there. And we sit there and we think to ourselves, okay, so I'm not like that person. I mean, I may not be right there, but I'm not down there. And we think that the standard that God is looking at is the ceiling, and it's the sky. And the difference between Jesus and us is not anything like this, but it is completely a different category as far as his holiness, his purity, his goodness. I always remember that question. One of the religious teachers came to Jesus to ask him this question, and he said, "Good teacher." And Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? Because only God above is good." In the biblical understanding of good, it's absolute goodness, it's perfection, it's without flaw. And the thing is that that's not you and I. And so when we sit there and we're out in the world, we need to just train ourselves. It's not that I'm so much better than that person. God loved me, and I've responded to that love, and I'm saved because of that love. Now, hopefully, you and I are growing up, and we become a little bit more like Jesus. And this is the part where I have some strengths, I have some weaknesses. I am sure that you could find somebody who's a non-Christian who is more virtuous in my weaknesses than I am after being a follower of Jesus for some 30 years. And you could sit there and go, well, man, why are you still there? I mean, if this pagan is better than you. And I love C.S. Lewis's answer to this. He says, well, you should have seen what I was like before Jesus was in my life. And what we're looking at is the progress of where we're headed. And again, it's not about that I'm categorically in every way, but I'm beginning to grow out of death and into life. And again, this is the part, Old Testament, New Testament, it's the same truths that are being repeated. So, and this is something that, you guys missed it last week. This very same thing was said in chapter 8. He's saying it all over again as far as don't think it's about you. No, it is on the account of the wickedness of these nations that I is going to drive them out before you. It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you're going to take possession of the land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations. Yahweh, I am your God, will drive them out before you to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people.
So, clarification for me, if he's going to wipe them out ahead of them, then why is he concerned about them integrating with them if they're going to be wiped out?
Great question. The victory belongs to the Lord, but we have a part to play. So, but we can actually disrupt the plan. We can disobey. So, God is committed to saving this world with us and through us. He could simply snap his fingers, but that's not what he's trying to work out here, because what he's doing is he's forming covenant partners. Real people in relationship who have chosen to follow Yahweh, to follow Jesus, and to have him be their God. So this becomes a part where there's different levels we can talk about of just how this all works itself out. Just like in this example, in chapter 8, what we heard is, you're getting this land because of my love for you and because of the promises that I gave to your parents, the patriarchs. And now you're getting this land because I'm bringing judgment upon these people. And both things are true at the same time. I'm the warrior. The victory is going to be because I'm with you and I'm for you. And I'm going to help fight the battle. But you're going to fight too, and you have a part to play. But if you don't trust me, if you don't follow me, if you go wayward, if you don't wipe the people out, if you end up making covenants with them, if you end up intermarrying with them, then their idols and their idolatry is going to trip you up, and it's going to lead to you getting kicked out. So that's what's at work. The victory will be because of Yahweh, but the victory isn't Yahweh all by himself, but it's actually us with him. But it's us following him. But if we don't follow him, then we're going to mess up the conquest, which is exactly what happened over and over and over. Now, what's going on here is that it's like, okay, so you're going to cross the Jordan. I'm going to go out before you. Don't live in fear. It's the Anakites. Who can stand against them? I mean, and this is the part where, the picture of the Anakites is really tall. And so on a worldly, oh, sorry, I forgot, sorry about that. So on a worldly level, you sit there and you come against somebody who's 7 feet tall and you're 5 feet tall. You go, there's no possible way, But Yahweh comes in and says, no. I'm a devouring fire. I'm going before you. This is going to happen. So you can listen to the lesson here and you can apply it to our own situations. What giants are you facing? You don't face those giants alone. You face them with Yahweh. You don't focus on the giant, but you focus on the Lord. Where is your focus in the midst of the battle? How does fear define your life? And so the very lessons that we're supposed to be learning in all of these things, these are lessons that they were to learn. These are lessons that we are to learn. Don't focus on the giants. Focus on Yahweh. Give him the battle. Trust in him. If he calls you to something, he's going to equip you. He'll be with you. It's going to be okay. Now, he goes over all this stuff, but don't get cocky. Don't get prideful. Don't get arrogant. Because what happens is, and we know this because they didn't listen, but this is what we see in Judges. The conquest failed. They didn't get rid of the presence. It tripped them up into idolatry. And then people started doing what was right in their own eyes, and they ignored the way of Yahweh. And they fell into failures. And then they got oppressed by foreign people. And then they cried out to God, and they said, where are you? How come these people are having victory over us? Come and help us. And Yahweh heard their cries, and what did he do? He felt compassion, and he raised up a judge, because he's committed to partnership. And this judge was a Holy Spirit-inspired leader who came and then helped the people have victory over their enemies. And the people had victories over their enemies, and they praised God, and they were thankful, and then they got comfortable, and then they forgot Yahweh, and then they sunk back down into idolatry, and then the cycle repeats itself all over again, and they didn't listen. This is all getting said. Listen. Now realize, this is not just written for them, this is written for us. They didn't hear it, but what are you going to do?
Ralph?
Yes, Elaine.
When you have friends who constantly talk of the success of their children in front of my children, and I feel very inadequate knowing that my children are just as accomplished and valued, is it best not to say anything, just to let them go ahead and express their favoritism? It's hard, not to want to say, well, you're not the only family with successful children.
So, great question, Elaine. And the question was about, okay, so kind of taking it down to some practical levels about how we're to live and not become arrogant.
Right.
And so the concrete question was, okay, so you're with a group of people and they're your friends, and some of your friends sit there and they basically talk about all the successes of their children. And in some ways it sounds like bragging. What should you do? So this is the part where, I have really been growing in my appreciation of Proverbs.
Right.
And so in that situation, it calls for wisdom. You're going to want to pray, right. Lord, I'm a little bit concerned. It seems like this is not really edifying. It seems more like boasting and bragging in a way of stuff. I probably wouldn't ever try to embarrass somebody in a group of people. myself, you know, but you start with this part of prayer, and you're saying, Lord, is there a word that you would want me to speak? And you know, and this is something that if you know, we're trying to grow in our experience of hearing God's voice, of being able to respond and do what He calls us to do. We might not hear well, we might slip up, but you know, you start with prayer, you start to ask. And you know, but the motivation should be love, not putting them in their place.
Right.
You know, and then there's also this part of maybe it starts with me. Maybe I'm a little sensitive to this area. Maybe this isn't really them boasting. This is just expressing admiration. You know, because sometimes, you know, it's just like, I'll tell you that, you know, I was proud of my daughter and in the senior speech, because I know one of the things that she was worried about is status, how people see. And so, you know, and she decided to stay in Washington State. She didn't want to go to one of the small schools. So it was UW, Wazoo, and Western. And but she didn't want to go to Western or Wazoo because it was a party school, but she got into the honors program and she got scholarships. And so there was that temptation for her to, you know, try to dress up Wazoo by letting people know, well, I got into the honors program and I got these different awards and all this stuff, and she didn't say any of it.
Yeah.
And I was proud of that.
Thank you. Yes.
But that becomes the part where it's like, when I say proud, I'm not trying to boast. It's just the sense of that looks like Christ being formed in her in some way. Instead of her being worried about her reputation and how people look at her, she just made it simple and just said the basic things.
Thank you.
When I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. I know you know, you use this word success.
Right.
Whose definition of success? You know, this becomes the part for us where it's like, you know, our sense of success is obedience to Jesus. What He defines as being successful. And it often isn't the boasting that we see in the world. And so then that becomes the part where, well, if this person's a Christian and I have a good relationship with them, I might ask him some questions. You know, you mention this a lot, and, you know, it could be that, you know, I mean, it's just coming out of love, but sometimes when I experience it, it just feels like bragging and boasting. And, you know, and so, you know, so it's just this thing where it's just like, I love you. You don't have to brag in front, you know, but all those conversations are really tricky. And so that's the part where it's just like, you know, and your motive for doing it really should be love. And if they don't know that it's love, it's not going to go well. But good question, tough question.
Thank you.
Now, the reason I went into this is I really do believe this, and this goes back to the sermon that I preached on Sunday, is that we need to have some trusted Christian friends who can check the fit and say, how is Christ being formed in you? But it's not going to be everybody. You know, I mean, that's the part where, you know, it's, and so more often than not, the danger for us is to be judgmental and to assume that we know, oh, well, this person really must be far from Christ because they're so bragging about their kids. And it might not be that way at all. I don't know what's in their heart. So I'm not going to be judgmental. I might have a concern. I'll pray. And then if the Lord prompts me, I would say something, but it's going to be because I think they can hear this in love. So there's my long answer. How am I doing on time here? Oh, boy. You know that I thought for sure we would get through chapter 9 today? Absolutely was convinced of it. Okay, so stiff-necked people. Yeah. No, Elaine, you didn't. This is on me. So, just so you know, this term, stiff-necked people, you refuse to bow down and to allow God to be God. And what's going on in this statement is this is who you've been. Don't let it be who you are. And now, what we're going to hear is a reiteration of the concrete ways that they expressed being stiff-necked in the wilderness wanderings. Remember this and never forget how you provoked Yahweh, I am your God, in anger in the desert. From the day you left Egypt until you arrived here, you've been rebellious against the Lord. So there's a great Jewish parable. And here's the tension of what we're coming into. There is a form and expression of the Christian life that Dallas Willard gives the term miserable sinner Christianity, where all you think about yourself is, oh, what a terrible person that I am. That's not the Christian life. That's not how Jesus sees you. But I am broken. I have problems. And I don't even know all of my brokenness, because part of it is I'm blind to that, and that's also why I need Christian community. And as you grow up in Christ, you see yourself a little bit more clearly. And the great testimony of Christians who've gone before us is that as they've lived out their Christian life, and as they've grown up, they have come to realize just how deeply sin goes down in them. So the Jewish parable says this: you should have 2 stones that you carry around with you. Carry one in each pocket. On one of the stones have it written, all this was made for you. And then on the other stone say, you're only dust. And pull out each one as needed. Sometimes what you need to hear is that all of this was made for you. That you're at the center of God's created purposes. That you, his image bearer, he died for. He's looking to be with you forever. You are the apple of his eye. He loves you. The truest thing about you is that you're beloved. Because if you sit there and think at your core you're just a miserable sinner and no good and there's no possible way that God loves you, you haven't heard the gospel. But it's altogether possible to get to a place where you don't see yourself and you think that you're all that. And that's what's the warning that's happening here. And the thing is that they needed that warning. There's 40 years and there's still this rebellious streak within them. There's still this rebellious streak in you. There are going to be times when you try to take matters in your own hands. But learn, listen, become wise. So, from the time that you left Egypt until you arrived here at Horeb, just so you know, the mountain of the Lord, Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, they're synonymous. So sometimes it's called Horeb, sometimes it's called Sinai. We're not quite sure why, other than there were 2 different names for it. At Horeb, you aroused Yahweh's wrath so that he was angry enough to destroy you. When I went up on the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord had made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water. The Lord, I am Yahweh, gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God. So the idea here is you have one part that signifies the whole part. And so the finger represents the power and presence of Yahweh. These 10 commandments, these 10 words of life, they came to us directly from Yahweh himself. He inscribed them. He wrote them. This term, finger of God, gets used in other ancient cultures. So, for example, in Egyptian culture, I think it was, maybe it was Osiris put his finger in Horeb's eye, and then Horeb couldn't see, and it was done by the finger of God. But it's a way of referring to God's presence and power. Moses is sitting here, and he's like, okay, God made a covenant with us. There's no other story, there's no other place where you have a God who says, I'm going to be your king and you're going to be my people and I'm going to be with you. And he wanted to live with us, and he did it by his very own hand, his finger. He wrote it. He wanted to be with us. And right when that was going on, we were already in idolatry. And this is the part where don't forget, remember, realize. So, just before I went off to college, the summer before, I had a friend who was a coworker. His name was Roger Violet, and he and I are working side by side. And he sits there and he says, "So, Ralph, what do you think about God?" And I said, "I don't." And he's like, "Well, you're kind of like a smart guy. I mean, you got to think something." And I go, "I just think that religion is a crutch for people. I think it's a way that they try to steal money from people. I mean, I think there's probably some God, but I can't imagine that he cares anything about us little ants on the face of this little rock in this vast universe. That's what I think."
Fast forward.
But that's where I was at.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then I realized, and then over a series of events, the Lord was trying to draw me to himself. He put people in my life who prayed for me, witnessed to me, that I had the opportunity to then start hearing the gospel. But I was an arrogant, stiff-necked person who really didn't care anything about God and didn't think he cared anything about me. And so in my own story, that's one of those things that I just remember. This wasn't about me climbing up to heaven. This was about God coming down and meeting me where I was. And the purpose behind this is that there is a place for us to come to reality and to realize that this is much more about God who's come to us than us who are all that. There was a question.
The 40 days with no bread and water, was that a miraculous sustaining by God for him?
Yeah, yes, indeed. I mean, you can fast for 40 days. People still sometimes do fast for 40 days of food, but you can't fast for that long without water. What's really amazing is that he does it, and then here you get reminded that he did it a second time. But yeah, that would be something. We've talked about this before. There is one of the spiritual disciplines is fasting. And I think there's a place for it. Jesus did fasting. So it's one of those things as far as just if I want to cooperate with the work of the Holy Spirit, and I'm way too quick to just appease my natural appetites. I might choose fasting as a discipline. But if you get serious into it, there's good wisdom and good literature to read. And this becomes one of those disciplines, which I said on Sunday is you really want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And so if you're doing it to try to either get something over on God so that you owe me, or if you're doing it to say, I'm all that spiritual, look at me, I've done a 40-day fast, you're doing it for the wrong reason. I think most people, when they get to the 40-day fast, they probably aren't there, but you never know. So, any prayer requests for today?
Will you pray for guests to come to Young Adult Alpha and Alpha Youth next Monday?
So very excited about this. We are doing both a Young Adult Alpha on Monday as well as Alpha Youth, which is basically, is that middle school and high school or high school?
High school.
So high school. And so, let's pray for that. Lord God, we are thankful that the trainees are here, and as they are participating with Alpha on Monday nights, and as Sean is helping to lead those teams that are going to be helping to lead those groups, Lord, may you be at work, knocking on the door of people's hearts. May there be an invitation, and Lord, may you call and help those who truly need you, and you are calling them to come. May they hear that call and come to Alpha. We lift up this opportunity. We give thanks, Lord. We know that it is your work to save, but thank you that you do give a part to play. May you bless Alpha this summer. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a good day, everybody. Oh,